The letter had promised wealth beyond measure, a grand estate, and a husband who owned half the cattle in Dallas, Texas. But when Penelope Laurent stepped off the dusty stagecoach in the autumn of 1876, the only person waiting for her was a lean cowboy with patches on his trousers and an apologetic smile. "Miss Laurent." The man removed his worn hat, revealing sun-bleached hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. "I'm Caleb Zimmerman. I reckon we need to have ourselves a talk." Penelope's heart sank as she clutched her carpetbag tighter. She had traveled all the way from Boston, leaving behind her position as a governess and what little security she had known, all because of those letters. Those beautiful, elaborate letters that spoke of prosperity and comfort, of a life far removed from the grinding poverty she had endured since her parents' deaths 3 years prior. She was 22 years old and had gambled everything on those promises. "Where is Mr. Zimmerman Sr.?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. Caleb's expression softened with genuine sorrow. "My father passed on 2 months ago, miss. Pneumonia took him quick. I wrote you as soon as it happened, but I suppose the letter never caught up with you." The words hit Penelope like a physical blow. She swayed slightly, and Caleb quickly reached out to steady her, his calloused hand gentle on her elbow. Around them, Dallas bustled with activity. Wagons rolled past, kicking up clouds of red dust. Cowboys hollered to one another outside the saloon. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The November sun beat down mercilessly despite the season, and Penelope felt sweat beginning to form beneath her high-collared traveling dress. "I see," she managed, though her mind was racing. She had exactly $3.17 to her name. Not enough for passage back to Boston, even if she had somewhere to return to. Her former employer had already filled her position. And the estate, the cattle, Caleb had the decency to look ashamed. "That was my father's doing, miss, and I apologize for his dishonesty. We got a small ranch about 5 miles outside town, 40 head of cattle, all of them ornery. The house needs work, and we are barely scraping by most months. My father, he got it in his head that he wanted to secure me a good wife before he passed, so he may have exaggerated our circumstances in his letters." May have. Penelope felt anger beginning to replace her shock. "He described a mansion. He mentioned servants and fine furnishings imported from Europe." "Yes, madam, and I am truly sorry. When I found out what he had done, I was fit to be tied. But he was sick by then, and I could not bring myself to upset him further." Caleb met her eyes directly, and she saw nothing but honesty there. "If you want to turn right around and head back, I will understand. I have enough saved to buy you a ticket anywhere you want to go. It is the least I can do after what my father put you through." Penelope looked around Dallas again. The town was rough and raw, nothing like the civilized streets of Boston. But Boston held nothing for her anymore. She had no family, no position, and no prospects. At least here, someone had wanted her enough to send for her, even if that someone had lied about his circumstances. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Zimmerman?" she asked carefully. "Call me Caleb, please." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, I figured we got us a few choices. I can buy you that ticket back east, like I said. Or, if you are willing, you could stay on at the ranch for a spell, see how you like it. No obligations, understand. You would have your own room, and I would treat you with complete respect. If after a month you decide it is not for you, I will still get you that ticket. But if you think you could make a life here, well, we could talk about making the marriage arrangement official." It was perhaps the strangest proposal Penelope had ever heard of, but there was something refreshingly honest about it. Caleb was not trying to trap her or force her into anything. He was offering her a choice, which was more than most men would have done. "I want to see the ranch," she said finally. "Before I decide anything." Relief washed over Caleb's features. "Yes, madam, that seems more than fair." He led her to a wagon that had seen better days, helped her up onto the seat, and loaded her trunk in the back with surprising ease despite his lean frame. As they rolled out of Dallas, Penelope studied him from the corner of her eye. He was young, probably not more than 24 or 25, with an honest face marked by sun and wind. His clothes were clean but mended in several places, and his boots were worn down at the heels. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, breaking the silence. Caleb's face brightened a bit. "It is not much, but it has got potential. Good water source, decent grazing land. The house is solid, built by my grandfather 20 years back. My mother passed when I was 10, and it has been just me and my father since. We were doing all right until a bad winter 3 years ago killed off most of our herd. Been building back up slowly, but it is hard work for one man. What would my role be if I stayed? Well, I suppose whatever you wanted it to be." Caleb guided the wagon around a deep rut in the road. "I am not looking for a servant, Miss Laurent. My father got this idea that a ranch needs a woman's touch, and maybe he was right about that. The house could use some fixing up, and I admit my cooking leaves much to be desired. But more than that, I think he knew I was lonely. Working a ranch by yourself, it is isolating. Sometimes I go days without talking to another soul." There was such simple honesty in his words that Penelope felt her anger at the deception beginning to fade. The father had lied, yes, but perhaps out of love for his son rather than malice. The ranch, when they finally reached it, was exactly as Caleb had described, no better and no worse. The house was a simple wooden structure, weathered but sturdy, with a front porch that sagged slightly on one side. A barn stood nearby, its red paint faded and peeling. Cattle grazed in a distant pasture, and chickens scratched in the dirt near the house. It was humble and worn, but Penelope could see the care that had gone into maintaining it. Caleb helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk inside. The interior was dim and smelled of wood smoke and dust. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a stone fireplace taking up most of one wall. The furniture was simple and handmade, everything scrupulously clean but showing signs of age and use. "Your room is back here," Caleb said, leading her down a short hallway. He pushed open a door to reveal a small bedroom with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the prairie. "It was my mother's sewing room. I fixed it up best I could when I thought you were coming for my father." The room was sparse, but had been prepared with obvious care. Fresh linens on the bed, a vase of wildflowers on the dresser, curtains that matched the quilt, small touches that spoke of thoughtfulness. "It is fine," Penelope said softly. "Thank you." Caleb set her trunk down and backed toward the door. "I will let you get settled. There is a basin and pitcher for washing. Supper will be ready in about an hour if you are hungry." After he left, Penelope sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning she had woken up on the stagecoach, full of nervous excitement about meeting her wealthy husband-to-be. Now she found herself in a run-down ranch house with a poor cowboy who had not even known she was coming. Her entire future had shifted in the space of a few hours. She should be furious. She should demand that ticket back to Boston. But as she looked around the simple room at the wildflowers that Caleb had picked himself, she found she was not quite ready to give up yet. There was something appealing about the honesty of this place. No pretense, no false promises. Just a hard-working man trying to make a living from difficult land. Penelope unpacked a few things, washed her face and hands, and changed out of her traveling dress into something more practical. When she emerged from her room, she found Caleb at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. He had changed his shirt and combed his hair, small gestures that touched her more than she wanted to admit. "I hope you like stew," he said. "It is about the only thing I can make that is fit to eat." "I am sure it will be fine." Penelope looked around the kitchen, noting the dishes stacked haphazardly in a cabinet, the blackened pots hanging from hooks, the general disorder that came from a man living alone. "May I help with anything? You are a guest, Miss Laurent. You just sit and rest." "If I am potentially going to live here, I should make myself useful." She rolled up her sleeves. "Besides, sitting idle makes me anxious." They worked together to prepare the meal, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. Caleb was right about his cooking. The stew was bland, and the biscuits he had attempted were hard as rocks. But Penelope found herself enjoying the simple meal anyway. They ate at a rough-hewn table, and Caleb told her more about the ranch, about his hopes for expanding the herd, about the challenges of making a living in Texas. "What about you?" he asked eventually. "What was your life like back in Boston?" Penelope hesitated, then decided that if he could be honest with her, she could return the favor. "I was a governess for a wealthy family. My parents died when I was 19, both of them within 6 months of each other. They left me with nothing but debts. I was fortunate to find the position, but it was not a life I wanted forever. Being a servant in someone else's house, caring for someone else's children. When I saw your father's advertisement, it seemed like a chance for something more." "A chance to be mistress of your own home," Caleb said quietly. "Yes, though I imagined something grander than this." She immediately regretted the words. "I apologize, that was rude. It is honest, I appreciate honesty." He pushed his plate away and looked at her seriously. "I cannot offer you luxury, Miss Laurent. I cannot offer you an easy life. What I can offer is a partnership. A chance to build something together. It will be hard work, and there will be lean times, but I promise I will always treat you with respect and do my best to provide for you." "Why do you need a wife, Caleb? Truly," he was quiet for a long moment. "My father was right about the loneliness. It eats at you, working this land day after day with no one to share it with. But more than that, I want a family. I want children to pass this ranch on to, someone to build a legacy for. My parents had a good marriage, full of love and respect, and I want that for myself. I know that is asking a lot from someone who just met me, but there it is." Penelope studied him across the table. His face was open, vulnerable in a way that most men would never allow themselves to be. She thought about her alternatives, returning to Boston to scramble for another position, living always at someone else's mercy, growing old alone and poor. Or she could take a chance on this honest cowboy with his struggling ranch and his lonely heart. "I will stay for the month," she said finally. "As you suggested, we will see how things go." The smile that broke across Caleb's face was worth more than all the promises of wealth his father had made. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that was both exhausting and oddly satisfying. Penelope woke each morning before dawn, helped Caleb prepare breakfast, and then set about making the house more livable while he worked the land. She scrubbed floors, mended curtains, organized the kitchen, and planted a small herb garden near the back door. Her hands, once soft from her indoor work in Boston, became roughened and calloused, but she found she did not mind. Caleb was unfailingly respectful, treating her like a valued partner rather than a servant or an obligation. He asked her opinion on ranch matters, listened when she suggested improvements to the house, and always made sure she had everything she needed. In the evenings, they would sit together on the front porch, watching the sun set over the prairie and talk about everything and nothing. She learned that he loved to read but rarely had time for it. She discovered he had a quiet sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He told her about his mother, who had been strong and kind, and his father, who had been a good man despite his final deception. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Boston, about her parents and the life she had lost, about her dreams for the future. 3 weeks into her stay, a harsh norther blew in, bringing freezing rain and bitter cold. Penelope woke in the middle of the night to the sound of cattle bawling in distress. She pulled on her robe and hurried into the main room to find Caleb already dressed, pulling on his heavy coat. "What is wrong?" she asked. "The cattle. They will try to drift with the wind, could end up scattered for miles or caught in ravines." He grabbed his hat and gloves. "I have got to get them bunched and moved to shelter. You cannot go out there alone in this weather. I have done it before." He headed for the door, but Penelope caught his arm. "Not anymore. Wait while I dress. I am coming with you. Miss Laurent, it is dangerous and cold, and you could get hurt or lost out there alone. I am coming." She did not give him a chance to argue further, hurrying back to her room and pulling on every warm thing she owned. When she emerged, Caleb looked torn between gratitude and concern, but he helped her into one of his father's old coats and found her a pair of gloves. The storm was worse than she had imagined. Freezing rain pelted them like needles, and the wind tried to knock them off their feet. Caleb saddled 2 horses quickly, helped her mount, and they rode out into the darkness. Penelope had never been on a horse in conditions like this, had rarely ridden at all, but she clung to the saddle and followed Caleb's lead. They found the cattle scattered across a wide area, confused and frightened by the storm. For hours they worked in the freezing darkness, Caleb calling out instructions, Penelope doing her best to follow them. Her hands went numb inside the gloves, her face burned with cold, and several times she thought she might fall from the saddle, but she kept going. Finally, as the first gray light of dawn broke through the storm, they got the last of the cattle into a sheltered ravine where they would be protected from the worst of the wind. Caleb rode up beside her, his face etched with exhaustion and worry. "We need to get back. You are half frozen." Penelope wanted to argue, but her teeth were chattering too hard to speak. The ride back to the ranch seemed to take forever. By the time they reached the barn, she could barely feel her feet in the stirrups. Caleb dismounted quickly and came around to help her down, but when she tried to stand, her legs would not hold her. She would have fallen if he had not caught her. "I have got you," he said, lifting her in his arms as though she weighed nothing. He carried her into the house and set her gently in a chair near the fireplace, which he quickly built up into a roaring blaze. "Do not move." He disappeared and returned with blankets, which he wrapped around her, and hot coffee, which he pressed into her shaking hands. Then he knelt in front of her and carefully removed her wet boots and socks, rubbing her frozen feet between his hands. "You should not have come out there," he said quietly, but there was no anger in his voice, only concern. "You could have been seriously hurt." "So could you," Penelope managed through chattering teeth. "That is why I came." Caleb looked up at her, and something passed between them in that moment, something warm and profound that had nothing to do with the fire. His hand stilled on her feet, and she saw in his eyes the same emotion that was swelling in her own chest. "You saved those cattle tonight," he said softly. "I could not have done it alone. You saved our livelihood, maybe even the ranch." "Our ranch," she heard herself say. "If I am staying, it is our ranch." "Are you staying, I mean?" Penelope set down her coffee cup and reached out to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Yes, Caleb, I am staying. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I want to be here, with you." He turned his face into her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I was not expecting this," he said. "When you stepped off that stagecoach, I thought you would take one look at me and demand to leave. I never imagined I would fall in love with you." "Love?" Her heart stuttered in her chest. Is that all right? I know it has only been a few weeks, but I cannot help how I feel. You are brave and strong and kind, and every morning I wake up grateful that you are here. If it is too soon to say so, I apologize, but I will not take it back because it is the truth. Penelope felt tears pricking at her eyes, but they were good tears, joyful tears. It is not too soon. Because I love you too, Caleb Zimmerman. I love your honesty and your hard work and the way you treat me like an equal. I love the life we are building together. He stood, pulling her up with him, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her forget all about the cold, the storm, and the hard night they had just endured. His arms around her felt like home, like safety, like everything she had been searching for without knowing it. "Marry me," he whispered against her lips. "For real this time, not because of some arrangement, but because we want to." "Yes," she said, and kissed him again. They were married the following week in Dallas, in a small ceremony at the church with just a handful of townspeople as witnesses. Penelope wore a simple dress she had made herself from fabric Caleb had bought her as a wedding gift. He wore his best shirt and trousers, looking nervous and proud and happier than she had ever seen him. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Caleb kissed her, she felt the rightness of it all the way to her bones. The ranch became truly theirs then, in every sense of the word. Penelope threw herself into improving it, using skills she had learned as a governess to keep meticulous records of their expenses and income. She learned to churn butter and make cheese, which they sold in town for extra money. She tended her growing garden and preserved vegetables for the winter. Slowly, painfully, their finances began to improve. Caleb worked from dawn to dusk, repairing fences, tending the cattle, and gradually expanding their herd. But no matter how tired he was, he always made time for Penelope. They would sit together in the evenings, her reading aloud while he mended tack, or simply talking about their day. He never took her for granted, never treated her work as less important than his own. He made her feel valued and cherished in ways she had never experienced before. The first winter was hard. There were times when Penelope was not sure they would make it, when the money ran out and the weather turned brutal, and it seemed like everything was against them. But they weathered it together, supporting each other through the difficult times, celebrating the small victories. In the spring, their fortunes began to turn. The cattle they had worked so hard to save through the winter produced a bumper crop of calves. Caleb sold a dozen head at a good price, and for the first time since Penelope had arrived, they had a little money in the bank. It was not wealth, not by any means, but it was security, and that felt like riches to them both. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the stars come out, Penelope placed Caleb's hand on her stomach. "I have something to tell you," she said softly. He looked at her, and she saw the moment understanding dawned in his eyes. Truly, the baby should come in early winter. "November, I think." Caleb pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I cannot believe it, a baby, our baby." When he pulled back, she saw tears on his cheeks. "Are you happy about it?" "So happy I can hardly stand it," she assured him. "Are you?" "Happier than I have ever been in my life." He kissed her tenderly. "I promise I will be a good father. I will work harder than ever to provide for you both." "I know you will. But Caleb, you work hard enough already. We have enough. We have more than enough." She meant it. Sitting there on that sagging porch with calloused hands and worn clothes, Penelope felt richer than she ever had in her life. She had a husband who loved her, a home that was truly hers, and a baby on the way. All the mansions and fine furnishings in the world could not compete with that. The months of her pregnancy passed in a blur of preparation and continued hard work. Caleb built a cradle from oak wood, spending his evenings carefully sanding and finishing it until it gleamed. Penelope sewed tiny clothes from fabric scraps, marveling at how small they were. The townspeople of Dallas, who had come to know and respect them both, brought gifts and offered advice. They had become part of the community in a way that filled Penelope with pride. On a cold November night, with a midwife from town in attendance and Caleb pacing anxiously in the next room, Penelope brought their first child into the world. It was a boy, healthy and strong-lunged, with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. When Caleb was finally allowed in to see them, he approached the bed with something like reverence in his face. Penelope placed the tiny bundle in his arms and watched as her strong cowboy husband turned into something soft and vulnerable. "He is perfect," Caleb whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one gentle finger. "He is absolutely perfect." "We should name him after your father," Penelope suggested. Caleb looked up at her, surprise and gratitude in his eyes. "Are you sure? After what he did?" "He brought us together, did he not? In his own misguided way, he gave us this life. I think that deserves to be honored." So they named their son Edward Zimmerman, called him Eddie from the start, and he became the center of their world. Caleb proved to be a doting father, somehow finding time between all his ranch work to rock the baby, sing to him, and simply hold him while he slept. Penelope had never loved him more than when she watched him with their son. The years that followed were not without their challenges. There were droughts and diseases, harsh winters and financial scares. But through it all, Penelope and Caleb faced everything together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing season. When Eddie was 2, they had a daughter, whom they named Caroline after Caleb's mother. She was a spirited child with her mother's dark hair and determined nature. 3 years later came another boy, James, who was quiet and thoughtful from the start. The ranch grew along with their family. Slowly but steadily, they expanded their herd, improved their land, and built their reputation as honest, hardworking people. They were never wealthy in the way that Caleb's father had promised in those original letters, but they had something better. They had a life filled with love, purpose, and the satisfaction of building something meaningful together. Penelope often thought back to that day when she stepped off the stagecoach in Dallas, full of expectations that were immediately shattered. She had thought she was coming to marry a rich man, and in a way she had. Not rich in money or possessions, but rich in character and love, in all the things that truly mattered. One evening, when Eddie was 10, Caroline 7, and James 4, the whole family sat together on the front porch. Caleb had finally gotten around to fixing the sag, and Penelope had made cushions for the chairs they had added over the years. The children were playing a game, their laughter ringing out across the prairie, while Caleb and Penelope sat close together, his arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever regret it?" Caleb asked quietly. "Not going back to Boston when you had the chance?" Penelope looked at her children, at the home they had built, at the life they had created from almost nothing. "Not for a single moment," she said. "This is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know I wanted it. I wish I could give you more. Fine dresses, a bigger house, all the things my father promised you." She turned to face him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "You have given me everything, Caleb. You have given me love and respect and partnership. You have given me a family and a purpose. You have made me richer than I could ever have imagined." He kissed her then, the same way he had kissed her on their wedding day, with tenderness and devotion, and a love that had only grown stronger with time. The children, used to their parents' affection, barely glanced over. "Tell us the story again," Caroline called out, abandoning her game. "About how Mama came on the stagecoach." It had become a favorite bedtime story, though Penelope and Caleb always edited it slightly for young ears. They gathered the children close, and Caleb began the tale. Your mama came to Dallas on a dusty old stagecoach, wearing a fancy dress and carrying all her worldly possessions in a single trunk. She thought she was coming to marry a rich man. But you were poor, Eddie chimed in, knowing his part. The poorest cowboy in all of Texas, Caleb agreed solemnly, with patches on my pants and holes in my boots. What did Mama do? James asked. Even though he knew the answer, Penelope smiled. I decided to give your papa a chance, and it was the best decision I ever made. Because you fell in love, Caroline said dreamily. Because we fell in love, Caleb confirmed, pulling Penelope closer. And we have been falling more in love every day since. Later that night, after the children were tucked into their beds, Caleb and Penelope stood together in the doorway of their bedroom, looking at the home they had built. The house was bigger now, added onto room by room as their family had grown. It was furnished simply but comfortably, every piece earned through their hard work. The walls held photographs of their children, drawings they had made, and small mementos of their life together. I need to tell you something, Caleb said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Penelope's heart skipped. What is it? I have been talking to some of the other ranchers about pooling our resources for a cattle drive to Kansas. If we can get our herds to market there instead of selling locally, we could make a substantial profit. Enough to really secure our future, maybe even expand the ranch significantly. That sounds wonderful. Why do you look worried? It would mean me being gone for months, spring through early fall. I would hate to leave you alone with the children for so long. Penelope considered this. It would be difficult, certainly, but they had weathered difficult things before. We will manage. If this is an opportunity for us to build something even better for our children, then you should take it. You are sure, I am sure. We are partners, Caleb. Your success is my success and vice versa. We make these decisions together. He kissed her forehead. What did I ever do to deserve you? You gave me honesty when I expected lies. You gave me partnership when I expected servitude. You gave me love when I expected only duty. She wrapped her arms around him. You gave me riches beyond anything your father could have promised. The cattle drive the following spring was indeed a success. Caleb returned home in September with more money than they had ever seen, enough to buy more land, expand their herd significantly, and even make some improvements to the house. But more than that, he came home with stories of the trail, of the challenges and adventures, and with an even deeper appreciation for his family. I am not doing that again, he announced on his first night home, after the children had finally released him from their excited embraces and gone to bed. The money was good, but being away from you all, missing months of the children's lives, it was not worth it. Penelope, who had indeed found the separation difficult despite her brave face, felt relief wash over her. We will find other ways to grow the ranch. We will, together. And they did. Over the years, they became known as two of the most successful ranchers in the area, not because they were the richest, but because they worked smarter and together. Penelope's careful record-keeping and business sense complemented Caleb's knowledge of cattle and land. They made decisions jointly, respected each other's input, and built something that neither could have achieved alone. Their children grew up watching this partnership, learning from their parents' example that a marriage should be built on mutual respect, honest communication, and shared purpose. Eddie proved to have a natural talent with cattle and loved the ranch life. Caroline surprised everyone by developing a keen interest in the business side of things, poring over her mother's ledgers and asking endless questions about finance and management. James, the quiet one, turned out to have a gift with horses and began breeding them as a side business when he was still a teenager. When Eddie turned 18, Caleb officially made him a partner in the ranch. When Caroline was 16 and begging to be included in business meetings, Penelope insisted they let her participate. When James was 15 and wanted to use part of the ranch land for his horse breeding operation, they helped him set it up. They were building a legacy, but more than that, they were building a family business where everyone had a voice and a stake. Penelope and Caleb grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies marked by years of hard work, but their love never diminishing. If anything, it deepened, matured into something even more profound than the passion of their early years. They knew each other's thoughts, could communicate with a glance, and still found joy in each other's company after decades together. On their 20th anniversary, Caleb surprised Penelope with a gift. It was a locket, simple but beautiful, with their wedding photograph inside. It had cost more than he could easily afford, and Penelope scolded him gently for the extravagance even as tears filled her eyes. "You deserve beautiful things," he said firmly. "You always have. I know I could never give you everything my father promised, but I have always wanted to give you tokens of my love. You gave me yourself," she said, fastening the locket around her neck. "That was always more than enough." They stood together on their front porch, the same porch where they had shared countless evenings, where they had told their children stories, where they had planned and dreamed and simply been together. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and well-kept, a testament to their years of hard work. "No regrets?" Caleb asked, echoing his question from years before. "Not a single one," Penelope confirmed, leaning into his embrace. "You gave me riches, Caleb Zimmerman. Not money or mansions, but the kind of wealth that actually matters. Love, family, purpose, partnership. A life well lived with a man I adore. What more could anyone want?" As the years continued to pass, Penelope and Caleb found themselves entering a new phase of life. Their children were grown. Eddie married with children of his own, Caroline running much of the business side of the ranch with sharp efficiency, and James building a thriving horse breeding operation. The ranch they had struggled so hard to maintain had become one of the most respected in the region. But it was not the success that filled Penelope with pride. It was the way her children treated their spouses with the same respect and partnership she and Caleb had modeled. It was the way Eddie consulted his wife on ranch decisions, the way Caroline's husband supported her ambitions, the way James and his sweetheart worked side by side with the horses. They had passed on something more valuable than land or cattle. They had passed on a legacy of love and mutual respect. Grandchildren came, filling the house with noise and laughter once more. Penelope loved watching Caleb with them, seeing how gentle he was, how patient. He was older now, his movements slower, but his love was as strong as ever. She would often find him telling the grandchildren stories on the porch, the same porch where he had courted her, where they had raised their family, where they had built their life together. One warm summer evening, when Penelope was 68 and Caleb 70, they sat together watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, supervised by Caroline, while Eddie and James worked in the barn. It was a scene of such contentment that Penelope felt her heart might burst with joy. "I have been thinking," Caleb said quietly, taking her hand in his, "about that first day when you stepped off the stagecoach. I was so scared you would take one look at the truth of my circumstances and leave. I remember thinking that my father had ruined everything with his lies. But he had not," Penelope said softly. "In his own misguided way, he brought us together. I was going to say, he gave me the greatest gift of my life. Not the ranch, not the land, but you, and the family we built together. The life we created from almost nothing. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. I may not have given you the mansion my father promised, or the servants, or the imported furniture. You gave me something infinitely better, Penelope interrupted. You gave me true partnership. You saw me as an equal when most men would have seen a possession. You valued my opinions, my work, my dreams. You made me feel cherished every single day of our marriage. You made me a better man than I ever could have been alone. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in increasingly brilliant hues. Around them, their family, their legacy, their riches, continued the rhythms of daily life. Grandfather, grandmother. One of the grandchildren, Eddie's youngest daughter, came running up to the porch. Tell us the story again, about how grandmother came on the stagecoach. Caleb and Penelope exchanged a smile. They had told this story hundreds of times over the years, and it never got old. It was their story, the foundation of everything they had built. As Caleb began the familiar tale, Penelope looked around at everything they had created. The ranch that had been barely surviving was now thriving, passed down to children who would care for it and eventually pass it to their own children. But more than the physical prosperity, they had created something rare and precious. A family built on love, respect, and partnership. She thought about the young woman she had been, stepping off that stagecoach with such different expectations. That Penelope had wanted security, comfort, an escape from poverty. She had gotten all of that, but not in the way she had imagined. The security came not from money in the bank, but from a husband who would always stand by her side. The comfort came not from fine furnishings, but from a home filled with love. The escape from poverty was not about wealth, but about the richness of a life well lived. The poor cowboy who had greeted her that day, with his patched trousers and apologetic smile, had indeed given her riches. Not the riches his father had promised, but riches far more valuable. He had given her his heart, his respect, his partnership, and his unwavering love. He had given her a family, a purpose, and a legacy that would outlast them both. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and Caleb finished the story to the grandchildren's delighted applause, Penelope leaned against her husband's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her. This was wealth, she thought. This moment, this family, this love that had sustained them through decades of challenges and triumphs. This was what true riches looked like. The children eventually went inside, called by their parents for supper, and Caleb and Penelope remained on the porch, reluctant to let go of the peaceful moment. In the distance, they could hear cattle lowing, the sound that had been the backdrop of their entire marriage. I love you, Penelope Zimmerman, Caleb said, using her married name with the same reverence he always had. I have loved you since you agreed to stay that first month. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Caleb. You are the best decision I ever made, the greatest adventure I ever took. You promised me partnership and respect, and you have given me that and so much more every single day. They kissed, tender and sweet, a kiss that held 46 years of marriage, of shared struggles and triumphs, of building a life together from almost nothing. It was a kiss that held the promise of whatever time they had left, and the certainty that they would face it together, as they had faced everything. As they finally rose to go inside and join their family for supper, Caleb held the door open for Penelope, as he had done thousands of times before. She paused in the doorway, looking back at the prairie one last time. The land they had worked, the home they had built, the legacy they would leave behind. She had come to Texas expecting to marry a rich man and found instead a poor cowboy. But that poor cowboy had given her riches beyond measure. A love that had lasted a lifetime, a partnership that had built an empire, and a family that would carry on long after they were gone. He had given her respect when she expected subservience, equality when she expected hierarchy, and a voice when she expected to be silenced. Inside, the house buzzed with warmth and life. Their children and grandchildren gathered around the long table that Caleb had built years ago to accommodate their growing family. There was laughter and conversation, the passing of dishes and the sharing of stories. This was their wealth, Penelope thought. Not counted in dollars or measured in acres, but in the love that filled this house, the bonds that held this family together. As she took her seat beside Caleb, their grandchildren clamoring for attention, their children discussing ranch business and family matters, she caught her husband's eye across the table. He smiled at her, that same honest, open smile that had first captured her heart all those years ago. And she smiled back, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The poor cowboy had indeed given her riches. He had given her everything that mattered. And as Penelope looked around the table at the legacy of their love, she knew that she was the wealthiest woman in all of Texas, not despite marrying a poor cowboy, but because of it. Years continued to pass in the gentle rhythm of ranch life. Penelope and Caleb grew older together, their steps slower but their devotion unwavering. They watched more grandchildren arrive, each one a new blessing, a new continuation of the love they had built. Eddie took over more and more of the daily ranch operations, consulting his parents on major decisions, but proving himself a capable leader. Caroline expanded their business interests, investing wisely and ensuring the ranch's prosperity for generations to come. James's horse breeding operation became renowned throughout Texas, bringing additional income and prestige to the Zimmerman name. On the morning of their 50th wedding anniversary, Penelope woke to find Caleb already awake, watching her with tender eyes. The lines on his face had deepened. His hair was completely white now, but to her, he was still the young cowboy who had offered her a choice instead of an obligation all those years ago. 50 years, he said softly, reaching out to tuck a strand of her own white hair behind her ear. Half a century with the most remarkable woman I have ever known. We should have a celebration, Penelope said. The children will want to make a fuss. They have already planned something, I am sure, but before we face all of that, I want this moment, just you and me, remembering. They lay together in the early morning light, hands clasped, and talked about their life. They remembered the hard times, the winter storms and financial struggles, the worries and fears. But mostly they remembered the good times, the birth of each child, the first time the ranch turned a profit, the simple daily joys of building a life together. You know what I treasure most? Penelope asked. It is not the success of the ranch, or even our beautiful children and grandchildren, though I love them dearly. It is that you never stopped courting me. 50 years, and you still bring me wildflowers in the summer. You still ask my opinion and value my input. You still look at me like I am the most important person in your world. You are, Caleb said simply. You always have been. The celebration that afternoon was everything Penelope could have wished for and more. The whole community of Dallas turned out, along with friends from neighboring ranches. A feast was laid out on long tables in the yard, and there was music and dancing. Their children gave speeches that made them both laugh and cry. The grandchildren performed a play they had written about the stagecoach story, complete with costumes and props that had everyone howling with laughter. But the best moment came when Caleb led Penelope into the center of the yard for a dance. The crowd fell silent, watching as the old couple moved together with the ease of 5 decades of partnership. They might have been slower, their steps less sure, but the love shining between them was as bright as ever. "Thank you," Caleb whispered as they swayed together, "for taking a chance on a poor cowboy, for seeing past the poverty to the man beneath, for building this life with me." "Thank you," Penelope whispered back, "for showing me what true wealth really is, for loving me not despite my opinions and ambitions but because of them, for being my partner in every sense of the word." As the music played and their family and friends watched, Penelope rested her head on Caleb's shoulder and thought about the journey that had brought them here. She had stepped off that stagecoach 50 years ago, expecting one life, and had found something completely different and infinitely better. The poor cowboy had given her riches that no amount of money could buy. The seasons continued their endless cycle, and Penelope and Caleb continued to be part of the ranch's rhythm, though their roles gradually shifted from active participants to beloved advisors and storytellers. They spent their days on the porch they both loved, watching their legacy unfold before them, always together, always in love. When Penelope was 73, she fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. Caleb never left her side, sitting by her bed day and night, holding her hand, telling her stories, refusing to consider a world without her in it. But Penelope, who had always been practical, knew her time was coming. "You have to promise me something," she said to him one evening, her voice weak but determined. "Anything," Caleb said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Do not let grief consume you. You have so much life left to live, so many grandchildren who need their grandfather. Promise me you will keep going, keep being the man I fell in love with. I do not know how to do this without you." "Yes, you do. We have been preparing for this our whole lives, building something bigger than just the two of us. Our family, our legacy, they need you. Promise me, Caleb." "I promise," he said, though his heart was breaking. "But Penelope, I need you to know you gave me the most extraordinary life. Every day with you was a gift. You made me richer than any man has a right to be." Penelope smiled, squeezing his hand with what little strength she had left. "We made each other rich. That is the secret, is it not? True wealth is not something you can possess alone. It is something you build together, share together, give to each other every single day." She recovered from that bout of pneumonia, to Caleb's profound relief and joy, and they were given several more precious years together. Years of watching more grandchildren grow, of seeing Caroline's business acumen ensure the ranch's prosperity, of witnessing Eddie's leadership bring the family closer together, of taking pride in James's success with the horses. When Caleb was 78 and Penelope 76, they sat together on their beloved porch on a warm spring evening. The sunset was particularly beautiful, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Around them, the ranch hummed with activity, their family continuing the work they had started so many years ago. "We did well, did we not?" Caleb said, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing. "We did more than well," Penelope replied, leaning against him. "We built something beautiful. Not just the ranch, but a family that knows how to love, how to work together, how to value each person's contributions. That is our real legacy. I love you, Penelope Zimmerman. I have loved you for more than 50 years, and my love has only grown deeper and stronger with time. And I love you, Caleb Zimmerman. You took a frightened young woman who thought she was coming to a life of luxury and showed her what true riches really are. You gave me everything that matters." They sat together as the stars came out, comfortable in the silence that comes from knowing someone so well that words are not always necessary. The poor cowboy and the mail-order bride who had built an empire, not of money or land, but of love and family and partnership. Caleb passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 years later, with Penelope holding his hand and their children surrounding them. He went as he had lived, with dignity and grace, secure in the knowledge that he had lived a full and meaningful life. His last words were of love for his family and gratitude for the woman who had taken a chance on him all those years ago. Penelope mourned him deeply but carried on, as she had promised she would. She lived another 5 years, watching her great-grandchildren grow, ensuring the family stories were passed down, and always, speaking of Caleb with love and pride. She told anyone who would listen about the poor cowboy who had given her riches beyond measure. When she finally joined Caleb, it was peacefully, surrounded by the family they had built together. Her last conscious thought was of that first day in Dallas, stepping off the stagecoach into an uncertain future. She had thought she was coming to marry a rich man, and in every way that mattered, she had. She had married the richest man she had ever known, a man whose wealth was measured in love, integrity, and the life they had built together. Their children laid them to rest side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that read, Caleb and Penelope Zimmerman, partners in life, love, and legacy. Together they built something beautiful. And the ranch they had struggled to save, the family they had raised, the love they had shared, continued on. Their grandchildren told their great-grandchildren the story of the mail-order bride and the poor cowboy, of how true love is not about what you can give in terms of money or possessions, but what you can build together through respect, partnership, and devotion. The legacy of Caleb and Penelope Zimmerman lived on, not in the acres they had accumulated or the wealth they had generated, but in the values they had instilled, the love they had shared, and the example they had set. They had shown that true riches have nothing to do with money and everything to do with how you treat the person you love, how you build a life together, and what you pass on to the next generation. The poor cowboy had indeed given his mail-order bride riches, riches that lasted far beyond their lifetimes, riches that could never be counted or measured but only felt in the hearts of everyone whose lives they had touched. And that, in the end, was the greatest wealth of all.